Hare Rama, Rama जय ओम विष्णुपाद परमहंस सतविराजकाचार्य अष्टोत्तर सतश्री श्रीमान अभय चरणारविंद भक्ति वेदांत स्वामी श्रील प्रभुपाद की जय। अनंत कोटि वैष्णव वृंद की जय। नामाचार्य श्री हरिदास ठाकुर की जय। प्रेम से कहो श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर शिवासुरी गौर भक्त वृंद की जय। श्री श्री राधा कृष्ण गोप गोपीनाथ श्याम कुंड राधा कुंड गिरि गोवर्धन की जय। वृंदावन धाम की जय। नवद्वीप मायापुर धाम की जय। गंगा मई की जय। जमुना मई की जय। भक्ति देवी की जय। तुलसी महारानी की जय। हरिनाम संकीर्तन की जय। ग्रंथराज श्रीमद् भगवद गीता की जय। All glories to the Son. All glories to the Son. All glories to the Son. All glories to His divine name, Srila Prabhupada. Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthaya. Shrimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Namaste Saraswati Gauravani Kachari Nirvishesh Shanyavadi Pascha. Everyone please hold your hands, repeat after me. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Narayanam namaskritya naram chaiva narottamam devi saraswati vyasam tato jayamudiraye. Thank you very much. Reading from Srimad Bhagavad Gita as it is. Introduction. In this edition I'm holding is page 26 at the very bottom, the last paragraph. It begins, in life we're accustomed to thinking either of the material or of the spiritual energy. So the discussion we left yesterday was on the point that we need to be in a state of being, quote unquote, state of being, such that at the time of our death or leaving this body, that state of being will transfer us to the spiritual world, to the abode of Lord Krishna. So the question was, how does one come into that state of being, which allows one to be? There are two energies of Lord Vishnu, the external and the internal. And we have to place ourselves in the internal energy of the Lord, the superior energy, rather than the inferior. And the question was, how can we do that? How do we transfer our absorption from the inferior energy to the superior? So that topic is dealt with today. In life, we're accustomed to thinking either of the material or of the spiritual energy. Now, how can we transfer our thoughts from the material energy to the spiritual energy? Now, before I carry on reading, I'm going to tell you what are these different topics of transferring. One concerns that we have to change the literature that we read or listen to or watch. What do we expose ourselves to? Secondly, we have to think of Krishna. There is a role played by Varnashram also in this. And finally, the mood of the paramour. So, there are the mood of the paramour. Paramour. So, we have some interesting topics that will be covered today. Srila Prabhupada carries on. There are so many literatures which fill our thoughts with the material energy. Newspapers, magazines, novels, etc. Now, we should be able to understand with this etc. that today we may have to include electronic digital media, right? Not just newspapers, magazines, and novels, but electronic digital versions.
They've gone electronic too.
I'm sorry?
Most of them have gone electronic also.
Right, even the novels,
Even
magazines.
Newsweek magazine.
Magazines, right? They're all electronic. Kindle, right? Or iPad, whatever, right? So, I'm just saying that we can understand that there are so many literatures which fill our thoughts with the material energy, and it is being served through these different media of either paper editions or electronic editions. Our thinking, which is now absorbed in these literatures, must be transferred to the Vedic literatures. So this is the significant point, that we are not just reading newspapers. You know, it's an interesting phenomena at least in Indian households. I'm sure it must be a similar thing with the Western households. But the man of the family, he will say, I just watch news to find out what's going on. But of course the television goes on 24 hours a day. But the pretext is I just watch the news. My point is, we don't just watch, we are absorbed. We are absorbed. These things absorb us. Now of course the digital version is, I just check on the internet a few details. But of course the internet is going on 24 hours a day. We are actually absorbed. We don't just little bit nibble at something and come out. We do not come out. It's a bit like the chakra vyuha that Abhimanyu went into, but he could not come out of. So, this is called absorbed. You cannot put it down. You cannot switch it off. So that's absorbed. So Prabhupada is saying, our thinking must be transferred to Vedic literature. This absorption has to go towards Vedic literature. And therefore the implication also is that sometimes we make a note. It means stopping the absorption that we already have. You must stop that. It cannot coexist. There's another interesting phenomenon I've seen. While watching telly, the japa mala is going on. So, while watching, or while seeing the internet, the japa, the beads are somewhere or other. Oh, I didn't know about the telly.
I've seen people like that.
Right. But the point is, Srila Prabhupada is making this point. Our thinking must be transferred to Vedic literature. Transfer means it stops the one it's absorbed in now. Okay. The great sages, therefore, have written so many Vedic literatures, such as the Puranas. The Puranas are not imaginative. They are historical records. In the Chaitanya Charitamrita, there is the following verse. Maya mukta jivera nahi Satta Krishna Gyan Jivera Kripaya Kaila Krishna Veda Purana. Mugdha means absorbed. Maya mugdha, very absorbed in Maya, in the illusory. And nahi Satta Krishna Gyan, he has no awareness of Krishna. So, Jivera Kripaya Kaila Krishna Veda Purana. Out of compassion on that living entity, Lord Krishna has provided Veda and Purana. So Srila Prabhupada writes, actually here Krishna really refers to Krishna Dvaipayana Vyas. The forgetful living entities or conditioned souls have forgotten their relationship with the Supreme Lord. And they're engrossed in thinking of material activities. Just to transfer their thinking power to the spiritual sky, Krishna Dvaipayana Vyas has given a great number of Vedic literatures. So here's the point, that it's for this purpose this literature exists. So that we may take advantage of it and transfer our absorption, which is presently on the mundane, in the inferior energy of the Lord. Remember those two energies of Lord Vishnu, the external, the inferior energy and the superior energy. So it's just for the sake of transferring our absorption, our state of being, from the inferior to the superior, that this Vedic literature exists. First, he, Vyasadeva, divided the Vedas into 4. Then he explained them in the Puranas. And for less capable people, he wrote the Mahabharata. In the Mahabharata, there is given the Bhagavad Gita. Then all Vedic literature is summarized in the Vedanta Sutra. And for future guidance, he gave a natural commentation on the Vedanta Sutra called Srimad Bhagavatam. So this was a bit of an elaboration on the point that Vyasadeva, out of his kindness, he has provided Vedic literature. And this is the Vedic literature we just heard about, the 4 Vedas, the Mahabharata, which includes the Bhagavad Gita, the Vedanta Sutra, and Srimad Bhagavatam. So now Prabhupada is more or less saying, therefore, we must always engage our minds in reading these Vedic literatures. Just as materialists engage their minds in reading newspapers, magazines, and so many materialistic literatures, we must transfer our reading to these literatures, which are given to us by Vyasadeva. Now it gives you an idea, the kind of absorption you have to have in the Vedic literature. Because we have an idea, don't we, how absorbed we are in mundane literature. We never tire. We can read again and again. Another interesting thing I've witnessed You know how the news is usually repeated throughout the day if there's nothing new. It's just repeated. I have seen somebody watch every repeat of that news all through the day, every day. So, I mean, people are seriously absorbed. So it gives you an idea that you could not possibly be doing too much reading of Vedic literature. Because in comparison, how much we do in mundane literature. So this is necessary. Remember, if you want to change your state of being, there's something at stake here. It's not just to impress somebody else. There's your own life at stake. There's a process which kicks in that decides what's your destination when you leave this world, and is determined by your state of being, which is determined which of the two energies of Lord Vishnu you're absorbed in. So it won't do to say to Yamaraj, I was only checking the news. It will not do. It will cost you very dear. So do think about it. However hard it may be to let go of mundane literature, there is a lot at stake. So do think about it. Now we come to the second point. And the second point deals with the point that really the purpose of all this literature is to always think of Krishna. Right? So Srila Prabhupada writes, did I miss something? I might have. Let me read it. In that way, right? In that way, it will be possible for us to remember the Supreme Lord at the time of death. That is the only way suggested by the Lord. Now, Prabhupada is using this word, only way. There is no alternative. And he guarantees the result. There is no doubt. So actually, it behooves us to make that effort. Tasmat sarveshu kaleshu mam anusmarayutya cha mayarpita mano buddhi mam evaishyasi asamshaya. This is chapter 8, text 7. So it's a very nice verse. And the emphasis is to think of Krishna. Therefore, Arjuna, you should always think of me in the form of Krishna, and at the same time continue your prescribed duty of fighting. With your activities dedicated to me, and your mind and intelligence fixed on me, you will attain me without doubt. Now here's the clincher, the important, significant detail here. The mind has to think of Krishna. And we should let go of this foolish notion that we can juggle thinking of material thoughts and Krishna at the same time. That's very foolish. However, the interesting thing is you can juggle thinking of Krishna while doing your duty. You cannot think of Krishna while being absorbed in material energy, but you can think of Krishna while doing your duty. That's the interesting part. And the duty, the nature of the duty is also connected to Krishna because you're doing it as a dedication to Krishna also. Now, if you think about it, you really cannot dedicate your television viewing time for Krishna. You just cannot. It doesn't sit. But you can cook for Krishna. You can raise your family for Krishna. You can farm for Krishna. You can teach others for Krishna. But you cannot really be absorbed in material energy for Krishna. That Yukta and Vairagya doesn't apply. Right? He does not advise, Krishna does not advise Arjuna simply to remember him and give up his occupation. So now we're going into the area of Varnashram. How Varnashram plays a role in transferring our consciousness from the inferior energy, our state of being, from the inferior energy to the spiritual, to the superior energy. No, the Lord never suggests anything impractical. So that's another kind of indicator that Krishna is his advice is never without practical foundation. It is not something that's artificial. It is something you can do while meeting all other obligations. Now, so remember this idea of duty is in the nature of Varna and Ashram. That means Varna and Ashram are very conducive. They're compatible with Krishna consciousness. Srila Prabhupada makes a practical point here now. In this material world, in order to maintain the body, one has to work. Krishna's suggestion is practical, it's not impractical. And so his suggestion is whilst you have to maintain the body, whilst you're working to maintain the body. Human society is divided, according to work, into 4 divisions of social order: Brahmana, Kshatriya, Vaishya, and Shudra. The Brahmana class, or intelligent class, is working in one way. The Kshatriya, or administrative class, is working in another way. And the mercantile class and the laborers are all tending to their specific duties. In the human society, whether one is a laborer, merchant, administrator, or farmer, or even if one belongs to the highest class and is a literary man, a scientist, or a theologian, he has to work in order to maintain his existence. The Lord therefore tells Arjuna that 2 things. 1, he need not, meaning must not, give up his occupation. 2, while he is engaged in his occupation, he should remember Krishna. Mam Anusmara. So this is the practical suggestion the Lord is giving. Now, go back. You can only think of Krishna if you're reading Vedic literature. It's connected to that point. The Vedic literature helps you to think of Krishna. You have something to think about. If you don't read, there's nothing to think. The information comes from the Vedic literature. So there's a conclusion to all of this. If he doesn't practice remembering Krishna while he is struggling for existence, then it will not be possible for him to remember Krishna at the time of death. This is the conclusion. If a person fails to remember Krishna in his daily life, while he's trying to meet the needs of his bodily existence, he's unable to do so, then how does he expect to do so at the time of death? Which is even more challenging than your daily affairs. So that's the practice. We're coming to this point about practice. That's going to play a little key role as we proceed with the discussion. So now we're entering into the area of Lord Chaitanya's recommendation of how to transfer your energy, your absorption from the inferior energy to the superior. Lord Chaitanya also advises this practice of remembering Krishna. He says, Kirtanya Sadahari. One should practice chanting the names of the Lord always. Again, it's coming back to practice. Practice remembering Krishna, practice chanting the names of Krishna. So again, this is at the expense of our original practice of being absorbed in the mundane material energy. The names of the Lord and the Lord are not different. So, Lord Krishna's instructions to Arjuna to remember me and Lord Chaitanya's injunction to always chant the names of Lord Krishna are the same instruction. Because the name of the Lord and the Lord are not different. If you remember Him or you chant His holy name, it's the same. There is no difference because Krishna and Krishna's name are not different. In the absolute status, there is no difference between reference and referent. Therefore, we have to practice remembering the Lord always, 24 hours a day, by chanting His name and molding our lives, activities in such a way that we can remember Him always. Now here's the key word is can. In other words, if you're doing things right, if your practice is correct, then you will remember Krishna always. That's the test. That's the sign. If you are able to remember Krishna always, under any circumstance, 24 hours a day, then you are following this prescription of Lord Krishna's advice, Tasmat Sarveshu Kameshu Mam Anusmara Yudhyacha Maya Arpita Mano Buddhi. Or you are then also following Lord Chaitanya, Kirtanya Sadhana. So all of this is judged whether you are able to, you can remember Krishna all the time. Now finally, there is a question, how can I do this? So this comes to the last consideration in this section of transferring our thoughts from the inferior energy to the superior, and that's to do with the mood of the paramour. How is this possible? The acharyas give the following example. If a married woman is attached to another man, or if a man has an attachment for a woman other than his wife, then the attachment is to be considered very strong. The point of this is not a man attached to a woman. The point is very strong when it's extramarital. The nature of it is very strong. Remember this point. One with such an attachment is always thinking of the loved one. The wife, in other words, despite having your own spouse, you're thinking of that person. That means it supersedes your attachment for your spouse. It's that deep. It's very, very deep. Why is this being mentioned? It's just going to be made clear. The wife who is thinking of her lover is always thinking of meeting him, even while she is carrying out her household chores. In fact, she carries out her household work even more carefully, so her husband will not suspect her attachment. So it's so strong that one tries to disguise it, that others may not notice, but it is there. See, it's very deep. Otherwise, normally, if you think about it, when the attachment is not strong, there is that common proverb, right? Out of sight, out of mind. But here, we're talking about an attachment is so strong, It is out of sight, but not out of mind. The mind is fully absorbed. Similarly, Prabhupada carries on, we should always remember the Supreme Lover, Sri Krishna, and at the same time perform our material duties very nicely. So that means our love for Krishna cannot be, it has to be of this order, of that strong order of paramount. A strong sense of love is required here. So that's a requirement. You cannot do this process without a very strong sense of love for Krishna. If we have a strong sense of love for the Supreme Lord, then we can discharge our duty and at the same time remember Him. That's the point. That's how you can do it. Normally when you're doing your duties, you do not think of Krishna, but you will think of Him if there is a strong attachment. That strong attachment is not possible if you're not absorbed in Vedic literature. See this, you see the whole dots connecting. So if your absorption happens to be for everything other than Krishna, other than Vedic literature, this practice is not possible. This is not possible. You will do your duties and you will most certainly not be thinking of Krishna at the same time. It's shown by the fact that you have no interest in other things. It's shown in that. Because your mind is conflicting. Your attachment for Krishna. You don't have enough time in the day to think of Krishna. Therefore, how could you possibly divide your attention to something else? If you could, then your sense of attachment is not strong. That's the proof. Now, Srila Prabhupada says a very interesting thing. But we have to develop that sense of love. In other words, we don't have it. We don't have it. So it has to be developed. You have to cultivate. You have to bring it about. The fruit of the tree doesn't exist, so you have to cultivate the tree until it bears fruit. Right now, our sense of attachment is not there. So there's a certain practice which will help us develop it. So we should adopt that practice. Arjuna, for instance, was always thinking of Krishna. He was the constant companion of Krishna. And at the same time, he was a warrior. Krishna did not advise him to give up fighting and go to the forest to meditate. When Lord Krishna delineates the yoga system to Arjuna, Arjuna says that the practice of this system is not possible for him. Now a comparison is being made. Well, if I don't do this process of becoming absorbed in Krishna, thinking of Krishna, chanting His name, maybe there's another process that's easy. And Srila Prabhupada is picking on this practice of Ashtanga Yoga. And that Arjuna, who could think of Krishna, but he could not practice Ashtanga Yoga. Arjuna Vacha, Yo Ayan Yogastvaya Prokta, Sam Yena Madhusudana, Etasyaham Na Pashyami, Chanchalatvat Sthim Sthiram. Arjuna said, O Madhusudana, the system of yoga which you have summarized appears impractical and unendurable to me. For the mind is restless and unsteady. Chapter 6, text 33. But the Lord says, Yogina api sarvesham mad gatena antaratmana sratavan bhajate yoma same yukta tamo mataha. Of all yogis, the one with great faith, who always abides in me, thinks of me within himself, and renders transcendental loving service to me, is the most intimately united with me in yoga and is the highest of all. That is my opinion. Chapter 6, text 47. One who thinks of the Supreme Lord always is the greatest yogi, the supermost jnani, and the greatest devotee at the same time. The Lord further tells Arjuna that as a Kshatriya, he cannot give up his fighting. But if Arjuna fights remembering Krishna, then he will be able to remember Krishna at the time of death. We are, almost coming to the end of the entire introduction. And I'm looking at the time, and who knows, possibly tomorrow we will finish, or at least the day after, for sure. So Srila Prabhupada says, but, going back, referring to this process of remembering Krishna always, chanting his name always, but one must be completely surrendered in the transcendental loving service of the Lord. So it's important to note that it's not a mechanical process that transfers you from the inferior energy to the superior energy. It's not something mechanical. You can't expect a ritual to transfer you. Your mind has to go. Your mind has to go. Not the fact that you went through a set of beads a number of times, or even if your mouth moved and vibrated a certain sound. It's your mind. Through all this, your mind has to go. Your absorption has to go from one energy. And if you're trying to juggle both of them, then again, this is not the process. Process is to completely let go of the one absorption and fully absorb in the other. Now obviously you know, therefore, that it's not enough to do a little chanting or a little reading now. If you're going to let go, you need a lot of chanting and a lot of reading. Does that make sense? To compensate. You see, 24 hours. So sometimes people say, well, I've done it's not 2 hours. You have 24 hours to account for. You have to think what I have to do. Now you may not be able to do one activity throughout, but in the material world also we don't do one activity. We do a variety, but they're all completely absorbed in material energy. We do a variety. That same variety of activities can be done spiritually. But you have to stop this thing of coexisting both of them at the same time. One foot in each boat. You know the consequence of that, right? So, Prabhupada is saying, but one must be completely, the word completely underlined, surrendered in the transcendental loving service of the Lord. We work not with our body, actually, but with our mind and intelligence. That's a very key sentence there. So, if the intelligence and the mind are always engaged in the thought of the Supreme Lord, then, naturally, the senses are also engaged in His service. Superficially, at least, the activities of the senses remain the same, but the consciousness is changed. That's how consciousness is changed. It requires all of that we've just covered today. So now, a few more points on this mind and intelligence. The Bhagavad Gita teaches one how to absorb the mind and intelligence in the thought of the Lord. In other words, that's what it's teaching. It's teaching the use of your mind and intelligence rather than the use of your senses, rather than external. In fact, Krishna in the 3rd chapter, he discourages the show of being a devotee. Mithyachara sa uchite. Manasasmara, who mentally thinks of the object of the senses, but makes a show of having renounced them. That's condemned, in fact. So such absorption, Bhagavad Gita teaches one how to absorb the mind and intelligent thought of the Lord. Such absorption will enable one to transfer himself to the kingdom of the Lord. If the mind is engaged in Krishna's service, then the senses are automatically engaged in service. This is the art, and this is also the secret of Bhagavad Gita. Total absorption in the thought of Shri Krishna. You know, this is one of the things no commentator before Srila Prabhupada has ever, expressed. They've expressed all kinds of funny notions, except this very clear notion, given in the Gita itself, that one must be fully and completely absorbed in the thought of Krishna. And Prabhupada says this is both the art, karma koshalam is mentioned in the Gita, and also the secret is mentioned in the 9th chapter, Pratyakshavagamam Susukam Kartamam Rajavidya Rajaguyam Pavitra Vidamuttamam Susukam Kartamam. So it's Rajaguyam, it's the secret of all secrets. It's the art of work, and it's the greatest secret. Which is what? To become absorbed in the thought of Krishna. And Srila Prabhupada says something very interesting, what we mentioned earlier. Modern man has struggled very hard to reach the moon, but he has not tried very hard to elevate himself spiritually. Meaning, not equally hard. Right? He has tried very hard to reach the moon in terms of getting a rocket and all kinds of propulsion systems and advertising it and making fake movies. But he hasn't done anything like that for spiritual elevation. If one has 50 years of life ahead of him, he should engage that brief time in cultivating this practice of remembering the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Now he comes to a conclusion. This practice is the devotional process. This practice, so earlier Prabhupada mentioned one has to practice, one has to cultivate, to develop the sense of love. This sense of love comes from this devotional process, which is Shravanam, Kirtanam, Vishnu, Smaranam, Pada Sevanam, Archanam, Vandanam, Dasyam, Sakhyam, Atma, Nivedanam. These 9 processes, of which the easiest is Shravanam, hearing the Bhagavad Gita from the realized person, will turn one to the thought of the Supreme Being. Here's the magic. This is the magic. Bhagavad Gita becomes interesting when heard from the lips of a realized soul. It becomes interesting. You see? Tell me more. Please. Parikshit Maharaj, he said that to Shukadeva Goswami. Hearing the Srimad Bhagavatam from his lips, he said, it is so absorbing, I've forgotten my thirst and my hunger. I've actually forgotten it. Please carry on. He became so absorbed. This is called absorption. Can you imagine being so absorbed, you forget your thirst and your hunger? And sometimes it's true, in material phenomena, some people are so absorbed in playing their game, virtual, they are there for hours and hours. No drink, not even going to the washroom, nothing. So, this absorption in Bhagavad Gita is possible when you're hearing from the lips of a realized soul. Otherwise, it doesn't have that attraction. This thought of the Lord, constant thinking of the Lord, will lead to remembering the Supreme Lord and will enable one, upon leaving the body, to attain a spiritual body, which is just fit for the association of the Supreme Lord. Now, I think we can all appreciate now, after what we just read, that actually a person who is able to do this most certainly will remember Krishna at the time of death. You know, it is that caliber, that quality, not this superficial absorption, very deep. The Lord further says, Abhyasa yoga yuktena cetasa nanya gamina paramam purusham divyam yati parthanu chintayan. He who meditates on me as the Supreme Personality of God in his mind, constantly engaged in remembering me, undeviated from the path, he, O Arjuna, is sure to reach me. Chapter 8, text 8. And Prabhupada ends, and this is where I'm going to end, because then we'll finish tomorrow or the day after. This is not a very difficult process. And the significance of hearing from a realized soul is what we will discuss from tomorrow. Right? This is not a very difficult process. But it hinges on some key points. And one of them being the significance of a realized person or hearing from a realized person. Subject of tomorrow. Thank you very much. Are there any questions?
It's an interesting point, hearing from a realized soul. Some people have trouble finishing the last parts of Bhagavatam or reading other verses because they were used to reading it from Prabhupada. And of course the other ones, Vijayanatha Swami and Gopi Pranadhana, took the things from past acharyas. But some people would rather spend the time reading just the first cantos of Bhagavatam and the parts that Prabhupada did and not read some of those other books at all because they don't feel it's the same realization as coming straight from Prabhupada.
There was a letter, I did some proofreading of the Shiksha Rita. There was a letter that Srila Prabhupada wrote to Govinda. I believe Govinda was in Chicago at the time. And there was some upheaval going on in our movement at the time.
So that wasn't Govardhan?
And Prabhupada said,
Govardhan?
I commend you for saying that if I had only written the Bhagavad Gita as it is, you would be content with reading only the Bhagavad Gita as it is and nothing else. That was specifically what he said in that letter. Because I think at the time there was some attempt to include things that Srila Prabhupada had not said and books that Srila Prabhupada had not written. This is not to reflect on Gopi Pranadhana and Prabhu or anybody else, but I'm just making the point that Govinda expressed his opinion that he would not look to anything else. And if Bhagavad Gita as it is was the only book Prabhupada had ever written, he would content himself with that. I'm just confirming your point.
At the same time, I'll read some of those, but it's not quite the same for me as reading Prabhupada. So I get to the point at the end of Prabhupada's Bhagavatam, I'll still read those. But
I'm just saying that Srila Prabhupada personally commended one of his disciples on this specific point, that he was content to listen from the lips of his realized spiritual master rather than look for any other source at the time. So just
some of the people,
corroborating.
they're continuing on in the Buddhist with the Prabhupada, but then again it's still
Oh, it's not a question of the mood actually. I must emphasize this point.
yeah.
It's actually the person has to be a realized soul. And Prabhupada this was part of the spirit of the Bhagavad Gita, it must be heard from the lips of a pure devotee of the Lord. Srila Prabhupada made that point early in the introduction, and is going to continue that point tomorrow in our reading yet. So, even the Maha Mantra he mentioned, it has to be heard from the lips of a pure devotee. Now, what is so difficult about the Maha Mantra? It's only got so many syllables. You know, they're not beyond the capacity of anybody else to say them. But it is not simple mechanical sound vibration. It is very dependent. This is the point, your mind and your intelligence, they cannot become absorbed unless they hear from a realized soul. That's the point. That is the actual crucial point. When Parikshit Maharaj was listening to Shukadeva Goswami, it was that personality who was speaking, who himself was very absorbed in telling it, that attracted Parikshit Maharaj. They weren't engaging in a farcical kind of drama, which is what Srila Prabhupada condemns in the first canto that goes on amongst professional reciters. They get together and they have this farce of discussing the Bhagavatam. And then when the break takes place, they get the bidis out, smoke, relax, they're tired, then they rejuvenate and come back after a cup of tea. So not like that. So that kind of phenomena happens when the person is not realized. And the person who is listening is also not serious. See, Parikshit Maharaj, he established his eligibility to hear by giving up an entire kingdom. Everything.
Empire.
He became,
He was
completely... I'm sorry?
He was emperor of the world. He was emperor of the world, the whole world.
Yeah, he gave it up. And that's his eligibility to hear, I'm saying. So something similar needs to be done by us. Then we have the capacity to listen. Can you pass the mic, please?
I can. I can understand your point about, for example, I first heard the Maha Mantra from the lips of Allen Ginsberg in the student union of the SUNY at Binghamton, New York, State University of New York. It didn't really leave much of an impression on me. I don't even think I liked the tune he sang. However, 4 years later, I heard the same mantra from two sannyasis in Nepal who were, mind you, in the process of looping. However, they had received this mantra from the lips of a pure devotee, and somehow the potency, because they were repeating what they heard from their spiritual master, somehow the potency was so there that I could hardly open my mouth, because I knew that if I said these words, it would completely change my entire life. That's how I understood the potency in that condition. So I also understand that Srila Prabhupada gave various instructions to the devotees to please write. To please write. Write for the BTG, write different books, translate. He ordered different devotees to translate into different languages, especially one, the Bengali. The ones that I know were Swarup Damodar Maharaj and Bhakti Churu Swami and Subhag Maharaj. They were all encouraged to please translate different books from the Bengali. So we can understand that these devotees were completely absorbed in Srila Prabhupada's instructions. And also, he instructed certain devotees to write children's literature and gave certain instructions on it, and instructed the artists to create different things, so that they would be the windows to the spiritual sky. And he gave a lot of instructions, and rejected certain things and accepted certain things and advised certain things. So writing has to be there. He gave certain restrictions and certain instructions. So, in my mind, there's no harm in reading the rest. I mean, I was one of those people also until I took the VIG course and then we finished the whole Bhagavatam. I never read it until that time. And I assure you, when we finished, it was at least as thrilling as finishing the Bhagavad Gita, when Sanjay says it's thrilling at every moment. So it depends on the mind and intelligence of the person who's doing the writing. And we have to use our discrimination of what we're reading. And what Srila Prabhupada said that we should read also. Not that we just go like by Clinton. Remember by Clintonot? Clintonot was one of Prabhupada's secretaries. He used to go to the library and read this, that, and the other thing. And Prabhupada didn't like it. But he couldn't help himself. And so Prabhupada did what he usually did. He took the devotees who were having difficulty and he would make them his secretary or his assistant so that they would have his association. But as far as the translations go, they were very careful. Not only they were very careful because of devotion to Prabhupada in translating and looking at the different acharyas' commentaries, but they didn't want the flack that they would get from the rest of the society. So you had the two things in motion. So therefore, I consider it worth taking a look at those volumes.
We might be slightly digressing, if I may say so, but just a small point. In the sense that I don't think it's a contention of whether others should write or not, or this. Let's go back to the key point. The point is you have to become absorbed in thought of Krishna. Now, if somehow or other the writer, the reader, is able to do that, then we should consider it successful. Now, even with Srila Prabhupada's books, you may, I can visualize how somebody can read them nonchalantly, not serious, and therefore I don't think they will have the desired effect. And in very short order, the person would stop even trying to pretend to read them. So the key point really is that we should become absorbed. We should hear from somebody who is absorbed, because that is contagious. If we hear from somebody who is a professional reciter, let's contrast it with something that's obviously wrong. A professional reciter, he may even be charismatic, he may be entertaining, but really, you do not change. Your consciousness does not change. It was an entertainment, and you will seek another entertainment. Whether it's the next entertainment, whether that's to do with Krishna or not, irrelevant. Because you get a certain high just from being entertained. That's the point. Whereas a Krishna conscious person, he's not a junkie for entertainment. If it's not to do with Krishna, he's not interested. That's the sure sign. If your detachment, Vairagya Vidya Nija Bhakti Yoga, Shikshatam Eka Purusha Purana, Shri Krishna Chaitanya Sharira Dhari, Kripam Buddhi Yasta. The measure is that we must have Vairagya with the inferior energy of the Lord. If that is still there, if your lust, anger, greed, illusion, envy is intact, then that's the real, if you like, litmus test. So it's not a contention. We're not here to judge unnecessarily, but we should judge for our own self. Am I becoming purified? Because the whole point of all this discussion was that at the time of leaving this body, There are two energies of Lord Vishnu, inferior and superior. If we haven't made the transfer, then Punarjanma, again you come back. Is that okay? I hope I wasn't out of order. Any other questions or? So we will finish either tomorrow. Yeah.
I do
Please.
I actually don't have a question. I thank you very much. I'm really learning so much.
Speak in the mic then.
Hare Krishna. Thank you very much. I'm learning so much. It's the very beginning of learning for me, the Bhagavad Gita from the beginning. But mine is a different intention. I've got some books that Yashoda Mata has made, which are part of a study guide, like a mind map that we study. While we're studying this Bhagavad Gita, we also use this book to study alongside. So we remember what Maharaj is saying. So remember what chapter does what. So remember which chapter brings out the best possible verses that we can remember. It's in English and it's in Hindi, and it's done by Yashoda Mata. I do apologize. Thank you very much. And it's 25 rupees. And if you'd like to buy, it's from Yashoda Mata. Please have a look. And if it interests you, you can...
At the end, when we finish.
Sorry, I beg your pardon. I thought
That's
we
okay.
covered it.
At the end.